Today I'm going to be talking about the poem as a spatial and temporal mapping of the human experience. What you see here is a picture of my mother, Taiyon Coleman. She died in 1997, and this is a picture of her in her hometown of Sparta, Illinois, somewhere in the 1960s when she met my father. You can see that she is young, she is hopeful, she is in love, she is beautiful, and she is a result of the potential of those who came before her, and I am a result of her possibilities that she created through her body and through her life. So you might ask yourself, how can a poem map human potential? And if you think about a map locates, it provides evidence, it also provides a record. My argument is that a poem can map human potential through the spatial and temporal placement of narratives and images. Poetry uses words to navigate and record the infinite epiphanies of human experience and emotion. A poem can posit itself in the past and present or future in order to display aesthetic beauty and to convey significance. And finally, because the readings and meanings of any poem are relative, the human potential is infinitely fluid and always applicable in many different ways. So for example, before we get started, I wanted us to consider a poem from the Harlem Renaissance, which most scholars schedule between the 1919 and 1940. And I want us to consider a poem, If We Must Die, and we'll read it together. And this will be the only poem I will put up on the screen. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and pinned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed. In vain, then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave, like men will face the murderous cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. 1919. And that's a lot of business, huh? Serious poem. And that poem was written by Claude McKay, 1889, 1948, and very serious photo. But the reason why I selected this poem, because I wanted us to think about, in a poem written in 1919, most scholars agree that it is the poem that kicks off the Harlem Renaissance. We can ask ourselves, what's the map of the human potential or the possibilities of applicable meanings in Claude McKay's poem? How might we consider it? Well, think about it. Most scholars are in agreement that when Claude McKay wrote the poem, he was thinking about the summer of terror in 1919 that involved the lynching and the murdering of African Americans in America. And this image is from Omaha, Nebraska in 1919 of lynching. But of course, Winston Churchill would go on to quote this poem, and he would use this poem to refer to encouraging troops to go into fighting to defeat the Nazis during World War II. And you might ask yourself the question, how can you have a poem that might be meant initially to be about one thing, but yet when people read it, its possibilities and its meaning changes? I would say that that represents the map of human potential, that when we are reading poems and writing poems and loving poems, if it is a good poem, it can mean many things to many different people, and that's the power of potential in poetry. So you ask yourself the question, well, why is this important? And I think that's a very good question. It's important to me because I write about these things. And for me, I have a collection of poems called Canned Goods and Other Non-Perishable Items, which is a collection of poems written about my life growing up on the south side of Chicago. Being one of 5 children raised alone by my mother, a single parent, and growing up with the intersections of poverty and gender and class and race and space and all of those delicious things. I'm particularly interested in how we might look at objects and objectify those objects and put them in spaces and think about time and meaning. So maybe if something happened in 1977, but if I'm writing about it in 2014, how the meaning changes in very delicious ways to talk about the possibilities of understanding it now, but also understanding possibilities that existed when the poem took place that maybe in that time and place we could not understand. So I want to read you some of my poems. The first poem is Decay. And this poem is about my mother, and there she is right there, Taiyon Coleman. And it's about her tooth. Her front tooth turned black. And my mother, as you can tell, although I'm biased, was very beautiful. She was not a vain person. And as you can imagine, a single parent with 5 kids by herself on the south side of Chicago, working every day, she barely had enough time to feed and to clothe us, so she couldn't worry about her looks. That was not a priority. But for some reason, when this happened, she became very obsessed with it. And we did have insurance, and so she would go every Saturday morning, maybe for a month, to get it bleached, but the darkness would never turn. And when writing about the poem, I thought to myself, maybe life was telling her she had to have a marker or a map in order to evidence the possibilities that she gave us through her body. And this is called Decay. Your right front tooth is brown, and you are going to get it bleached, making early morning Saturday appointments because you can't miss work. A Dun & Bradstreet supervisor downtown behind a glass window with a yellow phone book on your metal desk, you sit drinking coffee, taking calls, and watching for workers slipping over the edge. Your dentist's office is near the place you put my C flute in layaway. $1,500 over 3 years, $41.66 a month plus interest, and I stopped playing at 18 over 8 years, $1,500, $1,563 a month with no interest. Your babies carry bone from your body, and your husband leaves you alone with 5 kids and only 1 damaged tooth at the root. And you are lucky that even in your knowing smile, and that even with insurance and many morning Saturday appointments, the darkness that's in your mouth will never turn. The next poem is titled Sister, and I am one of 5, and my sisters will probably kill me for saying this. I have recently discovered that I have about 2, 3 more sisters, right? That's why poetry is really fun. You can write about a lot of things. But the body itself can be a map. It is spatial because our bodies change. You can almost imagine that pregnancy in a way is the objectification of the human life. And also it's temporal because that change also is influenced by time. My oldest sister and I stayed the same age for 30 days every year. And when she became pregnant, it was a big deal because she was not married. And as you can imagine, growing up without a father and having struggled with that, that was the one thing my mother preached to us every day. Whatever you do, don't get pregnant. But my sister did. Yeah. And of course, it was a big argument. And let me put on top of that, we're also Catholic. And we were mad at my sister, and she decided to keep the baby. And we didn't speak during the entire pregnancy. And for me, it was amazing because watching her body change was a way that she moved away from me and she changed. If we are maps, it was that she was creating her own map or creating a new space that I could not go into because I was not pregnant. Fast forward 9, 10 years later, I become pregnant. And notice what I said about temporal time. It is only 10 years later that I think to myself, oh, I get it, I understand. And I wrote this poem, Sister, for my sister to say, I get it now. It is 3 months before you tell me that you are pregnant, and I give you names of clinics and sterile places where saving your life is easy, and people will agree that it is your choice to straddle a table like a cheerleader, to split your thighs wide so they will never ache from straightening your back, so that others won't notice your titties sagging even in a nursing bra. You refuse my offer, and we fight over your foolishness, thinking that love can come in a red bone that carries a college football all the way from Evanston, Illinois. It is 6 months before we speak again, and your face is round, eating heavy strawberries, draining in kitchen paper towels. Your pants unzipped and rolled down, hug your black hips, and we barely make eye contact. Through peripheral vision, I watch you carefully bend your back to safely reach your seat. You kick off your high-top Filas that are worn over like hallway rugs, and they are out of style because you can't buy new ones. They are the only shoes that fit your feet that are swollen as holiday walnuts. And I think to myself that you, my sister, have never looked more beautiful. The next one is a poem that I wrote for my Uncle Wayne, who, like my mom, grew up in Sparta, Illinois, and he worked in the Peabody coal mine. And like many working class, poor working people, a lot of times their experiences don't get appreciated. And not only do I write a lot about time and space, I also write a lot about food, as you can probably tell. And he died when a machine came to scoop the coal, and he was caught between a curtain, and it crushed his legs. And then he died shortly, a couple of weeks later, as a result of complications from that injury. In this poem, in terms of space and time, I think about the routine and the ritualness of food, of eating, and of work. Daily menu for a Southern Illinois coal miner. Home from a night shift working, Uncle Wayne eats fried eggs, sage sausage, potatoes, and onions sealed to a slight brown with salt and pepper for breakfast. For supper, there is round steak, corn on the cob, and tomatoes, ripe or not, if he grabs them from the icebox, adding white vinegar to his taste. All his meals contain much the same: meat, starch, cucumbers, string beans grown on long crossed poles, and mustard greens smashed clean in Kroger store paper bags. At night, Uncle carries lunch to his new job, which starts him riding 60 degrees down in small cars, angling rocky surfaces, blown level by night explosions, announced only with the word "clear." Once inside the earth, he makes sure that his black body's on the right side of the safety. A plastic ceiling to floor-length curtain, blasted gray with cold dust, fraying its worn edges, smooth in its concave and seductive sways. The safety curtain reflects orange flashing lights. It is a dangerous rhythm, parallel to a single visual and audio beeping, tallying his lunchtime from his tin pail. It is a pale silver with the circumference of the Sparta printing plant's closing, and a metal handle made heavy with anticipation of cold pork chop sandwiches, wrapped in wax paper and fastened with solitary toothpicks, impaled and strong in their ability to enforce frailty and freshness, alongside red apples, Eckerd peaches, and 5 more hours of the night shift in the Illinois Peabody coal mine. This last poem is titled "Chicago in the Day Brother Increases His Chances of Reaching Age 21." And it's been in the media a lot about the murder of black boys, either as victims or perpetrators of violence, And the last I checked, for last year, it was over 500. Well, my brother graduated from high school in 1996, and when he graduated, the murder rate was over 700. And when my brother graduated from high school, he left Chicago and never came back. And that really kind of shook me up, because it was the first time that I realized that maybe he had had a different experience than I did as a black woman, right? Positionality, intersectionality. And this poem was a way for me to time travel back and to think about how could I not see the possibilities or the potential of his human existence when he was a high school student in Chicago. My brother attended a predominantly white high school where he was one of 6 black boys in his class. Within 4 years, by the time he became a senior, 4 of them had been shot. 3 of them died. And so for my brother, this was the reality. And so this poem celebrates that, but also provides a map and an evidence of his experience and a way to give him a way out, but also for me as the writer, for you as the listeners or the reader, it gives you a map or a way in. Mary Helen Washington has been dead for 8 years, and I have become an old lady, harvesting spearmint gum in my purse, offering pieces, exchanging them for others' approval. Maroon roads rage suburban green grasses, empty buses cross intersections, and we are among the few here. Mama, daddy, sisters, granny. A force of habit, I count the colored faces graduating, noticing 2 finishing that which started with 6 4 years ago. A shot, a gun, a stick, a hit. 1 gone for love, 1 gone for walking on the way, 1 gone trying to catch a ride, and the last 1 gone just fucked. The ceremony ends, and I am young, no longer dispensing gum. Grandmother is happy. She mentally marvels the ingredients of a sakatumi cake she will serve, set on survival. 4 eggs, 1 stick of butter, 1 cup of sugar, 6 ounces of sour cream. We head east on 95th Street, just passing Chicago's Mason-Dixon line. Cicero, Pulaski, Western, King Drive, no, Cottage Grove. Finally, brother, we are southeast. Home, you are finally graduated. And our father, the Chicago police officer, with your very same name, knows that his gun is for real. Thank you.